Hey guys, sorry I can't be there today. We're gonna dive right in and do a code along lecture for both second and fourth period. We didn't quite finish up the standard lecture on functions, like functions that run in the console. But that's okay. We'll get to that next class. We'll make up for that. And today we are going to do a lecture of functions in graphics, which is what you need to do tonight's homework. So check Canvas for the homework. It's just continuation of code HS, working through those graphics projects in 5.3. So go ahead and share my screen. There we go. That should be working. You should create a new project, put it in your functions folder, and you should probably call it function graphics lecture. Function graphics lecture would be a good name for it. And remember, these are your notes, right? This is intended to help you, so you want to hang on to it and know where it is. And also know, like, there's nothing magical about like how you do functions with graphics, right? It's exactly the same logic. You're just replacing lines of code with a name that you give to it, and that is a function. But just to show a variety of things that you can do, we're sort of having separate days for functions with graphics and functions doing other things. All right, enough about that. Let's go ahead and get started. You might remember one of the key points of last class is that when you have functions, you need both a function definition in which you describe the things that the function does, and then, of course, you need to tell the function to do its job. So we'll do function calls down here, right? So go ahead and denote those two different things, right? You can define a function brilliantly, but if you never call on it, obviously there's no point to having it. So let's start with a call to a pre-existing function. Let's adjust the size of our screen, give ourselves a little more room to work. So let's go ahead and do set size. Let's just do, I don't know, 500 by 500. 500 and 500, by the way, arguments, right? We're passing them in a function call. That's a recurring theme. Remember, if you learn nothing else, make sure you understand the relationship between arguments and parameters. They are not the same thing, but they do have a relationship, right? Arguments get copied into parameters in a function call. All right, so let's just run that, make sure we're good. Our screen should widen a little bit. Okay, that should give us enough room to see our code. Okay, great. And let me widen this out just a little bit. Okay, should be good. The first function that we want to define, there's a good application, right? Because in graphics, we know that to draw a circle, it takes like 3 or 4 lines of code, and same thing to draw a rectangle. So I sort of arbitrarily opted for rectangle. So let's go ahead and make a function that will do all of the work for drawing a rectangle. So let's do def, stands for define, right? Draw rectangle. And in these parentheses is normally where you would put your parameters, right? Parameters are variables that we create at the front end of a function. They allow us to convey information into that function. But right now we're going to write a function that just has 0 parameters. It's basically going to draw the same rectangle every time we call it, which is silly. And then, of course, we'll we'll take it and we'll improve on that version. But let's just start with one that does this. So that means it's going to have a fixed width. We'll do width is assigned the value of 100. Let's do height is assigned the value of 40. And let's do color is assigned the value of, I don't know, pick your favorite color. I will go with color dot yellow. And in order to instantiate a new rectangle, we need to give that rectangle a name. Let's call it rect. And we assign it the value of a call to rectangle. That's the constructor for rectangle. And rectangle, you might remember, requires two parameters. Sorry, two arguments, right? We have to pass in two things in our call to rectangle. So that's going to be width and height. And so there we go. Our rectangle is now created, and now we can call on methods, right? We call on methods from objects using dot notation. So rect dot set color, and we can pass in color. And rect dot set position, which requires an X and Y coordinate. And let's just put in some numbers here. I don't know, let's go 200 across and 100 down on the position. And of course, last thing, the thing that's easy to forget is we need to actually add it to the screen. So we just do add and then the name of our rectangle, and then it should appear on the screen. So we run it. And of course, it doesn't appear on the screen because we didn't call on draw rectangle. So we do go to kind of our main program. We'll do draw rectangle and open parentheses, close parentheses. That's how we call on a function. And now we run it. And hey, there's our beautiful yellow rectangle. And the beauty of functions, of course, is that you can call on them repeatedly, and with a single line, right, you're implementing many lines of code. So we call it twice. And again, we're disappointed if we're expecting to see two rectangles, because the thing about this rather lame version of draw rectangle is that like it draws the exact same rectangle every time. So we're just drawing it on top of the previous version. So that's not helpful. So let's make this a better function. Let's parameterize it. Parameterize it. It's fun to say. What do I mean? I mean, let's put some parameters to it so that we can modify the way this rectangle appears by changing the values inside of our calls to draw a rectangle. So yeah. So let's start with this. Notice I didn't even make this a constant. Let's have different positions available, right? So let's have the parameter be called xpos, ypos. And then in our set position, we will pass xpos and ypos. And so now down here in our function calls, right, we need arguments that are going to correspond with those parameters. So the first number that I pass in, we'll put one in the same place, 200, comma 100. Those values are going to get copied into xpos and ypos when we draw it. And let's have a different set of arguments. Let's go how about 100, comma 200, 100 across and 200 down for the other one. Okay, there we go. Now we have two calls to draw a rectangle, but we have different arguments, which result in different rectangles being drawn to the screen. Okay, so that's kind of fun. Let's parameterize further. We don't want every rectangle to be yellow. That is boring. So let's get rid of this silly constant here that makes every color yellow. Bye-bye. And let's add color as a parameter. So we'll say color. That's not how you spell color. Color. There it is. And now when we set the color, we'll set it to that parameter rather than to the constant. And we now need to modify our call. So for the first rectangle, let's do color dot green. And for the other one, let's do color dot blue. There it is. So now if we run, we should see rectangles at varying colors. All right, so now we have 3 parameters, and in response, that means we need to pass in 3 arguments. Okay, but what if we know that most of the time we're going to want the rectangles to be a particular color, such that sometimes we don't even want to have to say it? Well, there's the thing, and this is new, called default parameters, which means that you can assign a value to the parameter in your function definition. And if no other value gets assigned, then the parameter will take that default value. So I'm going to do color, assign the value of color dot yellow. Look at that. Okay. So these guys will still behave the same because this assigned value of green or blue is going to overwrite that. But if I add another rectangle, and let's put this one, let's see, we got room. Let's do it at 300 and 300, a little further down the screen. And notice I'm not going to assign a color argument here. I'm not going to provide a color argument. So we run it, it defaults to that yellow. All right. I am going to ask y'all to provide a default, actually add 2 parameters. I want you to add parameters for the width and the height. That's the obvious extension of this, right? We don't want every rectangle to be 100 by 400. That is silly. And I want you to have those rectangles have a default width and height of 50 each. Okay, so using what we just learned, I want you to take a minute and adjust draw rectangle so that you can adjust its width and height by providing the correct arguments. And if you don't provide those arguments, then we'll be looking at a rectangle with a width and height of, what did I say? 50 pixels? 50 pixels. Let's go with that. So of course, the default rectangle will actually be a square, which is fine. Square is a version of a rectangle. All right, so we're going to start with this. And yeah, I'm going to sit here awkwardly in silence for about 90 seconds while you guys get that done. And then we'll do it together. All right, I'm going to assume that most of you are through it. And of course, we got rid of the constants, which means now we need to add the width and the height as new parameters. So we'll do width. Assign the value of, let's see, we can expand this further, I think. Width is assigned the value of 50. That's a default parameter. Height is assigned the value of 50. So then when we set the size here, we can just use those parameters, height. And so if you look carefully, you'll realize that like the only two values that you need to provide to this rectangle, to the draw rectangle method are the first two, right? You need to provide an X position and a Y position. So that means this call should still be fine. And we're also not providing a width or a height to this one. So these things should still run, but they should all default to a width and a height of 50. So let's see if that happens. Oh, look at that. They're all now little squares. That's so cute. Okay, but that doesn't mean that they have to be squares, right? If we want to provide parameters for the width and height like I'm about to do. Let's put this one a little lower. We'll put it at 100 and we'll go down 400 pixels, new color, dot red, and our width will be 100 and our height will be 150. Let's try that. So if we do that. Okay, and we're off the screen. Let's just back that up a little bit. Let's make this 350. Still off the screen. All right, 300. Last time. There it is. Okay, so that is really, I think, what we need to see in terms of draw rectangle. Now I am going to hide my screen. Let me just stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to go back to that screen. Bear with me 1 second here. All right, what I am doing is I am adding a function that you will not be able to see. And it's called draw frame. And we're going to scroll so it is off the screen. Give me just a second to do that. Okay, that should be set up. Let me start sharing the screen again. Go up to screen 2. All right, I've commented out draw rectangle. That's good. Oh, you're still not seeing that. Okay. There we go. I've commented out all the calls to draw a rectangle. So what we have now is a blank screen. And now I want to add some calls to draw frame. Well, what does the frame look like? What does draw frame do? I'm going to put one at 50, 200 so you can see. And there it is. So a frame is basically, yeah, you probably figure it out, but it's a rectangle within a rectangle, right? And for now anyway, it has some, it has mostly constant values, although the two parameters represent the X and Y position, right? So if you go down, or sorry, if you go across 50 and down 200, that is the start of our frame. Some things that are the same for every frame, right? The width of the frame is 200 pixels, right? That is the distance from this edge, from that outer blue edge to the other outer blue edge. That's 200 pixels. What else? The height is 100 pixels, right? That is top edge of the blue to bottom edge of the blue. Should be 100 pixels. The border, that is just from this little blue band on every side is 10 pixels. And the colors doesn't really matter, but you can do your own colors if you prefer, but let's say inner color is yellow. And the outer color is just basic blue. All right, so these things you can lock in the function, you know, with constants. No mystery about that, right? The way that I was doing initially. But the X and Y coordinate are parameters such that like you can put other frames on. So if I call draw frame, let's go 150, 300. I've now got another frame that is a little bit lower down on the screen and so on. I could obviously call that as many times as I want. So I want you all to figure out how to do draw frame. Whoever's subbing, thank you. Why don't you give these guys notes, maybe, let's say 7 minutes, very arbitrarily chosen 7 minutes to do this. Just note the time, and then I'll provide the solution online. So if you haven't got it by then, you can look at my solution. Look at my solution, make sure you understand it, ask questions of your peers if you don't understand it, and what to do after that. What to do after that is to go to CodeHS and finish up 5.3. If you're done with that, help other students or work ahead. We will do this entire CodeHS unit. And your last option, of course, is you can work on stuff for other classes. But of course, no games, no mindless browsing, etc. You guys know the rules. Thank you for your assistance on that, and have a great day.